Let me start by acknowledging what is obviously true. The United States faces major problems. There's the deficit, there's the debt, there's rising income inequality, there's economic stagnation, there's a political class that has failed to grapple with the problems the United States faces. And as a result, there is a loss of trust. Americans don't trust their political institutions, and they don't trust that the future will be better than the present is. But you know, the funny thing is about that description, as accurate as it is of the United States today, it's also accurate of the United States in 1992, and in 1982, and in 1979, and in 1974. In fact, the United States has faced similar problems, tough problems, many times in the past. In fact, if you go look through history, it's something of a recurring theme. The idea that the United States, it has peaked, that its best days are behind it, and that its future will only see decline. In 1968, an esteemed political scientist wrote a book called The End of the American Era. In the early 1960s, many leading economists were convinced that the Soviet Union would surpass the United States to become the world's dominant economic power. Of course, there was the Great Depression, which was a catastrophe. There was the financial crisis of 1907, the Depression of the 1870s, the American Civil War. Time and again, the United States faced difficult times. Time and again, people said the United States has peaked. It will only decline from here. And time and again, the United States came roaring back, stronger than ever. Now, if you're being skeptical, and I hope you're being skeptical, you're going to say, well, past results don't guarantee future performance, which is absolutely true. The fact that the United States bounced back stronger than ever in the past every time does not guarantee that it will do so again now. That said, we have to look at why the United States was able to bounce back in the past so frequently. And the answer, I argue, is the United States was an open and dynamic society. In fact, the most open and the most dynamic society in the world. It's a society that admires ambition. It's a society that rewards risk-taking. And as a result, it has attracted the best and brightest from all over the world. It has attracted scientists, the visionaries, the inventors, the artists, the builders. And together, they made American society into the world's most dynamic. It made the United States the world's dynamo. All those factors are still true today. Here's just a few statistics to give you an idea of how dynamic American society really is. Consider that of the top 10 universities in the world, 8 are American. Of the top 20 universities in the world, 17 are American. Of the top 50 universities in the world, 37 are American. Or you can consider Nobel Prize winners and their nationalities. Americans have won the Nobel Prize 339 times. That accomplishment towers over every other country in the world. Nobody else even comes close. The UK comes second with 117. And those statistics actually are a bit misleading, because if you take a look at the work that foreign nationals did to win Nobel Prizes, very often what you'll find is they did the work in American universities. So, for example, since 1980, 14 Canadians have won the Nobel Prize. 10 did their Nobel Prize winning work in American universities. And you can see this dynamism throughout American society, but its finest expression, I would argue, is found in Silicon Valley. This June, I was able to attend a conference sponsored by Vinod Khosla, a legendary Silicon Valley venture capitalist. And it was a gathering of venture capitalists, of inventors, of scientists, of tech geeks, the most amazing collection of interesting, brilliant, ambitious people who want to change the world. It was a really exciting place to be. And the really intriguing thing about that gathering, the majority of people there were not born in the United States. Like Vinod Khosla himself, who came from India, they came to the United States from elsewhere. I met people from India, from China, from Vietnam, from Belgium, from Britain, from Canada. And when I asked them, well, why are you here? Why are you in Silicon Valley? Why are you in the United States? The answer was always the same thing. As one person put it to me, if you want to do something really big, you have to go to the United States. This is what makes the United States the world's dynamo, and this is what makes me optimistic about the American future. Now, you can say, and I think rightly, that inherent dynamism in American society could be stifled if the political class can't get its act together and fix the problems facing the U.S. government. The question is whether it can or cannot. Many people will say it can't. Look at the polarization, they'll say. Look at the gridlock. They're incapable of sitting down at a conference table and agreeing that the sky is blue. How on earth can they come to an agreement to settle the difficult problems facing the United States? And my answer to that is, well, let's take a look at a little bit of recent history. Go back to 1992. In 1992, one of the best-selling books was something called Bankruptcy 1995, which pretty much summed up the prevailing view of the state of the U.S. government's finances. There was a massive and growing deficit. The U.S. government was going to go over a cliff. And again, the question was, could the political class get its act together and solve that problem? Well, there's a lot of reason to think that they couldn't. Newt Gingrich was the House Speaker, and he was at loggerheads with the U.S. President Bill Clinton, and that fight was so intense, so fierce, so intractable, that at one point they actually had to shut down the U.S. federal government. There were literally closed and locked doors at the U.S. federal government for almost a month in 1995. That looks an awful lot like a polarized political class incapable of coming up with a constructive compromise and solving problems, doesn't it? And yet, they did come up with a compromise. They did come to an agreement. And only a few years later, the United States federal government was in surplus. And in the presidential election of 2000, the great debate was, what the heck do we spend all this money on? So, let me close by reminding you of the words of Winston Churchill, who was a great friend and advocate of the United States. Churchill said, "The United States always does the right thing after they have exhausted all the alternatives." I think Churchill was right, and that's why I'm optimistic about the American future.